Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mark's Backyard Birds. Tonight's topic is a bit of a conservation message, and that is the importance of leaving snags or dead trees, dead limbs. And yes, can we define a snag as a standing dead tree? Now, obviously, if it is in a dangerous place where it could break and fall and hit your house or hit your car or hit people, yes, you should take it down because you don't want to endanger anybody. But the message here is if it's in a place that's safe, and it takes years typically from when a tree dies, struck by lightning or whatever the cause of the death is, it takes years before that tree it will fall over. Here is a good example of a snag, and that is a tall standing tree that has died. And this tree probably died several years before this picture was taken. And obviously, the importance for leaving those is that they serve as both the buffet line or a restaurant, especially in the early years that after they die, bugs attack the trees and dig in and lay their eggs, and their babies hatch or their eggs hatch, and they become their grubs, and the grubs are eating the wood and that dead rotten heartwood. And of course, lots of birds feed on those insects, and they're prying insects from behind the bark as it's dying. And oh, I've got a good picture here of a red-headed woodpecker with a big old bug in his mouth, and this tree is dead, and you can tell there's lots of cracking and things going on. And this is early after a tree has died when it has this look to it, and there's lots of bark for them to probe behind. And woodpeckers obviously are the most well known for feeding on there, but there's tons of birds that will feed on insects on dead and dying trees because those insects inhabit all the nooks and crannies. And Carolina wrens and are going in there after them. White-breasted nuthatches, lots of warblers are clinging to the tree, reaching back in there. One of the questions I get asked a lot, and I've covered this in a couple other programs, but how do those woodpeckers know where to stick their tongue in or where to drill and then stick their tongue in for that bug that might be in there? They actually feel the vibration from the gnawing of the insects and under the bark through the pads of their feet when they're on the side of the tree. And that's when they know where to stop, tap, they get in there and get that bug and get it out of there. So that's pretty cool adaptation for them. But that's how they know where to look, and because not, they'd have to search every square inch. So that clues them in. And so we have them, where they obviously get a lot of food from them, and that's really, really important. That can be a small dead limb to a really big limb. But of course, nest excavation or many cavity nesting birds out there in the world need those dead trees because they're very, very well. I only know one woodpecker that can actually drill into live trees, a fully healthy live tree, but most they have to have dead wood. They had to drill into and create these cavities, and sometimes it's where a limb breaks off in a live tree, and they can drill that out. But in a perfectly live healthy like oak tree, it is so hard woodpeckers can't excavate there. So the dead trees are really, really important to them. And this is a red-bellied, and she's throwing out some of the shavings that she's created from her drilling. And of course, woodpeckers make many, many cavities during their lifetime, but they only use a few of them. They only nest in some, and then they also only roost at night in some, and one or two, or what in their life they go to regularly. But the rest of those tree cavities that they drill get occupied by lots of other cavity nesting birds. Obviously, the one of the most famous for us is the bluebird. And the whole reason for the nest box program came about is that when we first settled this country and we were putting in our homes and building our homes and neighborhoods, and one of the first things we did was we cut down the dead trees because they were dangerous. So you call them widow makers. The limbs could break and fall and hit you and could kill you. So a lot of but of course they went and cleared almost all the dead trees when they were developing the area and left none for wildlife. And that really hurt cavity nesting birds like the eastern bluebird. So the nest box program was developed to replicate, what they were missing in nature. And those are those natural cavities from those dead trees, those snags that were being cut down. And there are lots more birds that use those cavities other than that. One of the biggest that uses, cavities and trees and are the wood ducks. Absolutely gorgeous birds, and they're a tree duck. They nest in trees, and a lot of times they're old pileated woodpecker holes because they're so big. Or of course, like you can see this hole to the right of this male where a limb is broken off, or possibly they can nest in places like that. But they're large bird, and there's several ducks, not just wood ducks, that nest in trees. The hooded merganser nest in trees, common golden eyes nest in trees. So there are other species out there. This is just probably the most famous and gets a lot of attention. So from that big of a bird, the wood ducks, to things like the white-breasted nuthatch, and this is a knot hole in a tree that it was easy for the woodpecker to excavate out, but this is now being occupied by a white-breasted nuthatch. And the nuthatches are cavity nesting birds, classic, and they usually use downy woodpecker holes. So you've got the downy here, who is probing and getting into it's like a big old knot and peeled wood where there's insects attacking it. But the downy woodpeckers are really important holes for a lot of our smaller birds, like the white-breasted nuthatch and the tufted titmouse and the black-capped chickadee and the eastern bluebird. They all use old downy woodpecker holes. So they're drilling them all the time and they're using them. But they, again, if you haven't left a tree. Now, one of the least famous of the ones are cavity nesting birds is the Prothonotary warbler, a gorgeous, gorgeous bird. This is a cavity nesting bird, which you can see here. It's reaching into a cavity here, but they do nest, but they nest in really swampy areas where it's really wet. And yes, they will come to a bluebird box occasionally if you can put those up and get them to nest in there. So, snags are so important. And they really, like I said, they provide the insects, they provide the nesting cavities, and then there's unique birds like the acorn woodpecker out west who uses it as a cache tree. He drills all these small holes and he stuffs those with acorns, and then he can access those acorns when the weather's harsh and he needs them. But when there's plentiful acorns, they do cache them. Red-headed woodpeckers cache them usually in cavities and holes, but the woodpecker has a unique system of stashing these acorns. And there's famous pictures that have been on the internet for years of telephone poles are just absolutely riddled and filled with all these acorns. So it's a unique use for a snag or a dead tree. So it's really important if you do not have to cut down dead limbs and dead trees. And I've even heard and read an article once about someone who found a young dead tree had just died. He actually cut it down, cut the limbs off it so he could haul it. And then he took it to his yard, dug a hole, and planted the dead tree in his yard as a feeding station for the birds and nesting places for the birds. That's pretty extreme, but you can do that if you wanted to. Like I said, it takes a long time before they become brittle enough to be blown over, unless, of course, it's a really strong wind. But that can be done. So the conservation message here is to leave that dead timber for birds as long as you possibly can, because they definitely need it. So great idea for a program. We always want to talk about conservation and how we can help our birds. This is a good one right there. Give us a like, give us a share. And until next time, come on, let's talk birds.